what if you could actually create life? I mean, really create it, not just, normal reproduction, but a tiny human being completely from scratch.
Sounds like pure science fiction. Or maybe alchemy.
Right, exactly. But back in the 16th century, there was this really enigmatic figure who wasn't just thinking about it. He was apparently trying to do it.
Ah, you must be talking about Paracelsus.
That's the one. Welcome to the deep dive, everyone. Today, we're plunging into the fascinating and sometimes, frankly, baffling world of Paracelsus. He was this German-Swiss physician, alchemist, kind of straddling that line between early Renaissance science and deep mysticism.
A very complex figure.
Totally. And our main focus today is super controversial research into creating a homunculus that's basically a miniature, artificially made human.
Yeah, it's one of the things he's most, maybe notoriously remembered for.
So our mission here is to unpack this really audacious idea. We'll look at the bizarre alchemical recipe he supposedly laid out. We'll dig into the philosophy and theology behind it, like why would anyone even think of doing this?
Right, the justification.
And then trace its surprisingly long legacy. It pops up in science, literature, even, believe it or not, modern neuroscience. So this is your shortcut to understanding this really wild intersection of, let's say, early science and the mystical.
It's a fascinating journey.
Okay, so to get the homunculus, first, we need to get the man right. Theophrastus Bombastus von Hohenheim. Way easier to call him Paracelsus.
Definitely easier.
So picture the scene. 16th century Europe, medical thinking is kind of stuck, relying on ancient texts. Then this guy explodes onto the scene, a total rebel.
Oh, absolutely. A homo universalis, as they call them then. Interested in everyday medicine, chemistry, toxicology. But yeah, his defining trait was challenging the status quo.
And how? He didn't just question the old masters like Galen and Avicenna.
No, he flat out rejected them, said their books were useless. His whole thing was direct observation, learning from experience. He famously said, the patients are your textbook, the sick bed is your study. Real hands-on approach.
Didn't he do something really dramatic with their books? Like
Yes.
burn them.
He did. In the market square in Basel, he publicly burned copies of Galen and Avicenna. A huge symbolic gesture, basically telling everyone, forget this old stuff, let's look at the world ourselves. It was pure contempt for just blindly following tradition.
Wow. But he wasn't just about tearing things down, right? He had actual contributions, this iatrochemistry thing.
Yes, that was huge, applying chemical principles to medicine.
Yeah.
Using chemical substances, minerals, as remedies. That was pretty revolutionary for the time. Changed pharmacy.
And the toxicology part. Studying miners.
Right, he spent time in Austrian mines studying the specific diseases miners got. That earned him the title Pioneer of Toxicology. He understood something crucial about dosage, too, that the same substance could be a poison or a remedy depending on how much you used.
Which sounds remarkably modern, actually.
It does, which makes the other side of him, the mystical alchemist, wanting to create tiny people, seem even stranger, doesn't it?
Yeah, that's the big question. How does the proto-scientist fit with the homunculus guy?
Well, see, for Paracelsus, those two things weren't separate. The physical and the metaphysical, they were intertwined. His empirical method, his observations, they weren't just about the physical world.
Yeah.
No, he saw it as a way to uncover what he called divine secrets, the eternal laws hidden within nature, God's blueprints, basically.
Okay.
So the homunculus wasn't some weird magical side project. It was, in his mind, the ultimate extension of his empirical work, using chemistry, alchemy, whatever you want to call it, to understand and maybe even participate in the divine act of creation itself.
Wow. So chemistry as a path to understanding God's work.
In a nutshell, yeah.
Yeah.
It reframes the whole thing. It wasn't science versus mysticism. It was science as a form of mystical investigation.
That blend is just
Yeah.
captivating. So what was the big idea, the philosophical framework that let him even entertain creating artificial life?
Okay, the absolute core of his thinking here is the microcosm-macrocosm analogy.
Microcosm, macrocosm. Sounds familiar.
It's an old idea. It goes back to Neoplatonism, Hermetic traditions. But Paracelsus really ran with it. The basic concept is that the microcosm, the little world, is a reflection, like a mirror image, of the entire cosmos, the macrocosm, the great world.
So we contain the universe within us, sort of.
Exactly. He believed humans united everything, minerals, plants, animals, even the stars within themselves. Understand yourself and you understand the universe. That was the key.
And that ties back to his medicine, doesn't it? Like if you're sick, the balance is off.
Precisely. Sickness meant the microcosm was out of harmony. Health was about restoring that balance. And where do you find the remedies?
In the macrocosm, corresponding elements from the wider world.
You got it.
Yeah.
Find the corresponding substance or force out there in the universe to fix the imbalance in here, in the body. It's a very holistic view, even if the philosophy behind it is ancient.
Okay, that makes sense. So the homunculus then is like the ultimate expression of this.
Absolutely the ultimate. And the most controversial. Think about it. If man is a microcosm, creating a homunculus is like creating a perfect, self-contained new microcosm, made by man, reflecting the universe, and here's the really audacious part, reflecting God's own creative power.
Whoa, so it wasn't just making a tiny person, it was like proving humanity could participate in divine creation.
That seems to be the driving idea, taking this abstract philosophical concept and trying to make it physically real, a huge leap.
Okay, so the philosophy is deep, the ambition is massive, but the recipe itself, you mentioned De Natura Rerum from 1537. Let's get into the specifics. This is where it gets really weird, right?
Oh yeah, buckle up. Step 1, putrefaction.
Putrefaction, lovely.
He says you need a man's sperm, placed by itself. In a sealed glass vessel, he calls it a cucurbit.
Okay.
Then, this sealed vessel has to undergo the highest degree of putrefaction, basically controlled decomposition, for 40 days.
40 days, and how do you achieve this highest degree of putrefaction, the heat source?
Yes. The heat source. It's specified as a horse's womb. Venter equinus.
A horse's? What, like literally?
Well, no. In alchemical practice, venter equinus meant warm, fermenting horse dung.
Horse dung, of course it did. So sperm, sealed flask, 40 days, buried in warm horse manure.
That's just a step 1. It sounds almost like something from Macbeth, doesn't it? But for Paracelsus, this was, serious alchemy.
So what happens after 40 days in the incubator?
According to the text, the substance starts to live. It moves, it stirs, and it looks somewhat like a man, but transparent, without a body.
Transparent, like a little ghost.
Kind of. A nascent form, not yet fully physical, which then leads to step 2, nourishment and growth.
Okay, how do you feed a transparent, non-bodied thing?
Wisely, he says, with the arcanum of human blood.
Arcanum.
Yeah.
That word again, like a secret essence.
Exactly, a potent hidden principle. So you feed it this essence of human blood for up to 40 weeks. Note the time frame matching human gestation.
40 weeks. And still in the horse dung.
Still needs that consistent warmth, yes. Maintained for the whole period.
And if you manage all that, if you get the 40 days of putrefaction and 40 weeks of blood feeding, right?
The result, supposedly, is a living human child. All the normal parts, just much smaller.
Wow.
And later accounts even added details, claiming these homunculi could be fed human blood after birth and were skilled in art, capable of great works, even creating giants and dwarves, apparently.
These giants and dwarves. Okay, now it's definitely veering into folklore. But the core recipe, what strikes me is how it completely cuts out the female role. No egg, no womb.
That's a crucial point. It completely bypasses the female womb. A really bold, maybe even defiant move against the established biology of Aristotle and Galen, who, at least acknowledged some female contribution, even if they often downplayed it.
So this wasn't just weird chemistry, it was biologically radical, too.
Extremely. And you really can only make sense of this recipe if you keep that philosophical and theological context in mind. For Paracelsus, remember, this wasn't blasphemy. It was more like sacred mimicry.
Sacred mimicry. Explain that.
He believed man was made in God's image, right? So, man could reflect God's creativity by mastering nature's secrets, those arcana. Nature was God's handiwork, visible and tangible. The alchemist's job was to investigate its hidden mechanisms, its secrets, and maybe even, collaborate with those forces.
Okay, so by understanding and manipulating nature's processes, the alchemist is kind of imitating God in a respectful way.
That seems to be the idea. And there's a definite spiritual dimension, the use of human blood, for instance. For Paracelsus, blood was tied to vitality, the life force, maybe even sacredness. It kind of echoes the divine act of breathing life into Adam in Genesis. It elevates it beyond just mixing chemicals.
Right, it feels almost like a ritual.
It does. And critically, Paracelsus tied morality to it. He stressed that success was only possible for a virtuous, pious, and divinely inspired alchemist.
Ah, so not just anyone could cook one up in their basement lab.
Exactly. He specifically warned that an impure or unworthy operator wouldn't get a homunculus, They'd risk creating monstrosities or spiritual perversions. So the alchemist's own character was part of the formula.
That's fascinating. The integrity of the scientist matters. And what about the invisible womb idea? The flask and the dung replacing the real thing?
Yeah, that ties back into his metaphysics.
Hmm.
The sealed cucurbit, the fermenting dung, they create this contained, generative environment. It mirrors his idea that God himself had a kind of womb-like desire to combine parts into a whole. And that initial form, the transparent, bodiless entity, that perfectly reflects his interest in the unseen, the spiritual world that underlies the physical.
It's a whole coherent, if strange, worldview. But was he the first to think of artificial life?
Oh, definitely not. It's really important to place him in context. The idea of creating life artificially has a long history.
Like what?
Well, you have things like the begonia, this ancient, probably mythical technique for generating bees from a dead cow. There's the Jewish legend of the golem, created from clay.
Uh-huh.
And even earlier Arabic alchemical texts that talk about Tequin, the artificial creation of life.
So Paracelsus was tapping into an existing stream of thought, not just inventing this whole cloth.
Exactly. He was working within a tradition, albeit pushing it in his own unique, controversial direction.
And controversial he certainly was. You mentioned his disputatious manner. His texts were often obscure, allegorical. Did people take the homunculus idea seriously?
Well, he faced a lot of ridicule and marginalization from the established medical community. They often saw him as a dangerous quack or, at best, deliberately obscure.
Which brings up the authenticity question you mentioned earlier.
Right. This is a tricky area. After Paracelsus died, a lot of texts were published under his name that probably weren't actually by him. Forgeries were common.
So did Natura Rerum the source for this specific recipe?
It's considered a controversial late treatise. Some scholars question if it's genuinely his. And complicating things further, other works attributed to him describe homunculi differently, maybe closer to the golem idea. So we can't be 100% certain this exact recipe is pure Paracelsus. It might have been attributed to him later, maybe to lend it some of his rebellious mystique.
Which leads to another possibility. Could the whole thing have been a kind of test? Or even a joke?
That's a really intriguing interpretation, given how much Paracelsus despised blind dogma and what he called literal-minded fools.
Right. Maybe he put out this outrageous recipe as a way to smoke them out. Like anyone who actually tried to follow these instructions literally would reveal themselves as exactly the kind of uncritical thinker he fought against.
It's a compelling thought, a sort of intellectual trap disguised as an alchemical recipe. We can't know for sure, but it fits his personality, doesn't
It
it?
really does. So whether it was real, a metaphor, or a trap, this idea didn't just vanish after the 16th century, did it? You mentioned a legacy.
Far from vanishing. It actually had surprisingly long and weird afterlife.
How so?
Well, fast forward to the 17th century and the invention of the microscope.
Hmm.
Suddenly, scientists could see things they couldn't before, like sperm.
Ah, the animalcule?
Exactly. People like Nicholas Hartsoker looked at sperm under the microscope and thought they saw tiny, perfectly formed miniature humans curled up inside.
Seriously. Like fully formed little people.
That was the theory, the spermist theory. They believed these little humans, essentially homunculi, just needed the female womb as an incubator to grow. It was a very male-centric view of reproduction, and you can see the direct line back to Paracelsus's idea of bypassing the female role.
Wow. So the microscope actually seemed to confirm a version of the homunculus idea at first.
For a while, yes, but then came the logical problem.
The infinite regress thing.
Right, the homunculus fallacy.
Mm-hmm.
If a sperm contains a tiny human, does that tiny human sperm contain an even tinier human? And so on, forever. It becomes absurd.
Like Russian nesting dolls, but with people.
Pretty much. That, plus the fact that the theory couldn't explain why children resemble their mothers, eventually led to it being scientifically rejected.
Okay, so its scientific life was relatively short-lived, even with the microscope boost. But culturally.
Culturally, the homunculus proved incredibly resilient. It shifted from being a literal recipe to becoming a powerful symbol or metaphor in literature and art.
For what? Human ambition. Playing God.
Exactly. Ambition, hubris, the quest for artificial life, the dangers of forbidden knowledge. You see it discussed early on, like in Thomas Browne's Religio Medici in 1643, where he explicitly says he doesn't buy Paracelsus's recipe.
And then, of course, the big ones. Frankenstein.
Absolutely central. Mary Shelley's novel explores all those moral and ethical dimensions of creating artificial life. And Goethe's Faust, Part 2, features an actual homunculus character, a spirit created in a lab seeking to gain a physical body.
It's amazing how this single strange idea from Paracelsus just kept resonating through the centuries, taking on new meanings.
It really is. But maybe the most surprising place it ended up is modern neuroscience.
You mentioned this. How on earth did an alchemical concept make it into brain science?
Well, the term homunculus is now used to describe the sensory homunculus and the motor homunculus.
Right, I've seen those weird diagrams, the distorted human figure mapped onto the brain.
That's the one. It's a visual representation of how much cortical area is devoted to processing sensory input from or controlling motor output to different parts of the body.
And some parts are huge, like the hands and lips.
Exactly. Because those areas have way more sensory receptors or fine motor control, they get a larger representation on the brain map. So the resulting little man, the homunculus, looks distorted with huge hands, lips, feet, genitals.
So it's not a literal little man in the brain.
No, definitely not. But it's this incredibly useful conceptual tool, a metaphor for visualizing brain function. And it directly borrowed the name from that much older fantastical idea. It's a fantastic example of how a concept can migrate across centuries and disciplines, finding a completely new, practical application.
That really is the true legacy then, isn't it? Not whether Paracelsus could actually make a tiny person in a jar,
Probably not, no.
but the way the idea itself provided this framework, a way to think about creation, identity, the mind, the body. These huge questions.
Precisely. It's the intellectual journey of the concept that's so enduring.
So wrapping up this deep dive, we've seen Paracelsus and his homunculus research as this incredible mix, right? Early empirical science, deep mystical philosophy, maybe even a bit of theological ambition.
All woven together through that microcosm-macrocosm worldview. A really complex tapestry.
And the real value, as you said, isn't whether the recipe worked. It's the massive questions it forced people to grapple with about existence, about what humans can know, about our place in the grand scheme of things.
It pushed boundaries, absolutely, even in its strangeness.
And I think this dive really highlights something important for us today, doesn't it? How ideas that seem totally archaic or fantastical, like something out of alchemy, can actually echo through history and pop up in unexpected places, influencing science, inspiring literature, even giving us tools to understand our own brains.
It shows the deep human curiosity, asking those big what-if questions, can lead down some truly unpredictable paths. The interconnectedness of knowledge is amazing.
Totally. Which leaves us with a final thought for you, the listener. Considering how this concept of the homunculus went from, an alchemical recipe involving horse dung
Hard to forget that part.
to a useful metaphor in modern neuroscience. It makes you wonder, doesn't it? What other ideas that seem fantastical are out there today? Maybe things being explored in labs or in art or philosophy. What seemingly strange concepts might, centuries from now, find a completely new practical application in a way we just can't even begin to imagine right now.